the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Planted with Sara Pion. I'm Sara Pion, your host, and today we have Sam Johnston, cannabis attorney in Virginia, with us today. Sam, welcome. I'm really glad to have you here.
Thanks, Sarah. Great to be here.
And we're in person this time. We're going to have some chicken pot pie when we're done.
Awesome.
But what I want to talk to you about today. Well, first, before we get into all of that, what was your first cannabis experience?
Oh, I guess I was listening to Deep Purple, Machine Head album. Maybe I'm a Leo, and I was like, I didn't just hear it, I heard it.
It's a solid choice for music too.
Back in the 70s, child of the 70s. What can I say?
What got you into working as an attorney in the cannabis movement?
Great question. I mean, I've kind of always, been interested in cannabis, as a young adult especially, and as a musician. But previously, I had been a lawyer had an environmental law practice, and right around the time when states started legalizing cannabis, around 2014 or so, I decided that I wanted to sort of, I've been doing environmental law for a while, but I wanted to expand into the cannabis realm. So I started, studying up on it. States were starting to legalize. By that time, Colorado and I guess Washington and Oregon had legalized, and I just decided I wanted to get into it. So it's I kind of sought out some folks and got into it that way.
Now, before we get into your legal work, I want to go back a little bit. You're a musician. Cannabis and creativity. What are your thoughts?
Sure. Well, cannabis is a potent avenue for creativity in so many ways. I mean, I can remember one time when I was studying Latin in college. I was reading Latin poetry, and Virgil's Aeneid, and the thing about when you're learning a language is you're really learning it when you can understand the words as the words in that language without resorting to your native language in your head. So one time I was reading, I was doing my homework and I got a little stoned, and I was reading Virgil's Aeneid, and the rhythm of the words was exactly like the sound of the words and the meaning of the words, and I kind of stopped and said, "Whoa, this is great." And Virgil, of course, that back in the ancient Roman days, that was when, epic poems like that were transmitted from generation to generation through song. And so that was a really neat experience. But anyway, after that, as I became a musician and a keyboard player, I would smoke weed sometimes and play, and it just was a lot of fun. I mean, it's just fun is really a big part of it. Just basic fun, enjoying it. Music can be a chore. It takes some discipline, to learn your chops, to learn how to play, and to learn how to listen and learn how to play with other people. But sometimes weed can kind of soften or paper over the edges of that kind of experience. And whether you're playing alone or if you're playing with other people who also maybe are passing the joint around, and it facilitates jamming, facilitates improvising, which of course is a kind of a jazz tradition, right? Improvising,
absolutely,
and weed. So that's just kind of following along in the footsteps of other previous traditions in music.
Yeah. Jazz cigarettes and all that. Mm-hmm. But for me as a jazz singer, I found that like smoking a little bit before I go on stage, it helps me get into, it's just that little boost that gets me into that creative flow state where I'm still engaging with my audience, but a little bit of me is more into the music and just a little less aware that there's a bunch of people staring at me.
Right. Which helps.
It always helps. It's always a better show if you can kind of lose yourself in it a little. So, Virginia, tell me, what's been going on?
Well, Virginia, I like to look at Virginia as sort of the gateway to the South, you might say, as far as cannabis is concerned, because it's pretty far north. It borders on the northern states, and it's kind of a purple state. It's been trending purple anyway lately because of demographic changes in Northern Virginia and such. There's a pretty strong Democratic Party in Virginia, and it's not like some of the other sort of deep South states like Mississippi and Alabama, where I think cannabis is a little farther off.
Yeah,
but also Virginia is like similar to Kentucky is an old tobacco state, and so but tobacco farming isn't really is very problematic in a lot of ways. It's hard to make money as a tobacco farmer. It's not very good for the soil. It depletes the soil. It's not really a sustainable crop. And the product that it creates isn't exactly, healthy for individuals or society. I wouldn't want to outlaw tobacco, but at the same time, it's like, we can do better. So that leads to hemp. And I from my own experience in Virginia, I kind of realized a long time ago that hemp would probably get legalized before before cannabis would in Virginia. Because it traditionally was a crop in the colonies and in the early days of the U.S. Hemp was legal. It was legal at a lot of places. Kentucky was kind of the home of it, but there was a lot of hemp in Virginia too. And as most people know, George Washington said, "Sow the hemp everywhere," because hemp was an important crop for back in those days, both for farming and for the textile products that it created, and for the seeds, for the food you can get out of the seeds, and for the medicinal value. So I got into hemp at first when I had moved from California to Virginia and just got involved with the hemp movement there, which was a lot of fun because we did well, and we were able to put together a coalition of Democrats and Republicans in the Virginia legislature to get hemp legalized, which was fun because we were working with all kinds of different, it was one of those rare instances of bipartisanship and where everybody was in agreement. There's a strong libertarian streak amongst Virginians, and so we were able to get a broad consensus around the idea of why in the world would the government prevent farmers from growing hemp, which is utterly, completely harmless.
Well, that reminds me of Oklahoma, because they had a very libertarian approach to their policy. So it's interesting to see how that manifests in different states with their cultures and just the political makeup of the state itself.
Exactly. Sure. And Kentucky as well. Mitch McConnell, who obviously is, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, played a big role in getting the farm bill of 2018. I think it was 2018.
I believe you're right.
Time flies, but that was the federal legislation that legalized hemp, and Mitch McConnell steered that through because he knew that Kentuckians really wanted it. Kentucky was kind of the center of the hemp movement back in the 1920s and before that. And a lot of the tobacco farmers weren't doing well, and the idea was, well, let's take these tobacco barns and start drying hemp in them instead of tobacco, and so that took off, and it up to a point did pretty well. Unfortunately, it hasn't really taken off yet because we've had problems with the FDA and such, and I can go into detail about that if you like, or whatever. But so hemp has kind of been stalled a little bit in Virginia right now. Mm-hmm. And until the Democrats can get back into power.
It's interesting thinking about Virginia, Kentucky, hemp. It's like such a historic thing. And then when you throw Washington in there, it's like the Constitution one of the drafts was written on hemp paper.
Yes, that's right. Well, the Declaration. Yeah.
Oh, the Declaration. That's right.
Right.
Sorry.
Right.
It's afternoon.
Right. No, but that's a common, and there were several. Yes, hemp was commonly used for paper back in those days, and there's no reason why it can't be again.
Yeah. So let's talk about that FDA stuff.
Sure. Okay. Well, so the hemp industry sort of was starting to take off one of the challenges with growing hemp and making it profitable for both farmers and processors and retailers, and making it worthwhile for consumers is the efficient processing of the plant after it's grown, because it takes a lot of time and work and energy to process the plant into its various components for products. And the idea is, for farmers, hemp is very useful because it can be just another rotation crop to be added to the crops like corn and soy. It's good for the soil. It fixes nitrogen in the soil and can help with agriculture. But the problem is that we have gotten into the game so late compared with other countries. So, for example, China has invested a lot of resources into its hemp processing infrastructure, which is important for hemp because when you're making textiles, which is kind of the biggest tradition, the fiber products from hemp, textiles, clothing, the hemp that we see buy in the stores, it all comes from China or Canada or Europe, where they've been doing it for so long that they have the processing infrastructure in place. It takes, lots of money to invest in a system where you can do what's called decorticating, which is the process of separating out the hurd from the internal strands of the plant that then are spun into textiles. And those strands and hemp is a strong fiber. It's probably, I think, considered one of the, if not the strongest natural fibers. It was used by the colonists. It was used by the British fleet to make sails and ropes for that, and all. There's a whole history about that that's fascinating to read about. You can look it up online. But anyway, in fact, Thomas Jefferson invented a decorticator that he used to separate out the fibers. But to do that at scale requires a lot of investment and research and figuring it out. You have to be able to farm large acreages, and then you have to process large volumes of it with big machines. And it's kind of like, in order to make it work, it's just, you have to do it up to scale like any other farm crop. And nobody really, unless you're already a big company that's well funded, nobody can do that. One of the ideas behind legalizing hemp, just to take a step back a little bit, is to help sustainable farming and help family farms and communities and small farmers. But the agriculture industry has long been taken over in the United States by these giant corporations who farm in multiple states, and they're able to afford, the $500,000 harvesters that can harvest the crop. And they have, but again, with hemp, you have to design and these machines and develop this infrastructure so that you can not only harvest the fiber, but you can also save the seeds to make food and oils from, and save the flowers that can then be used to make medicine. And all of that requires a lot of investment. And yeah. So anyway, but which brings me to the FDA, because the idea now for hemp is that hemp companies can grow hemp for the medicine, which is profitable in the short term, while we're taking the longer time to develop the infrastructure to do the fiber and the other products. But in the meantime, there's already a good market for CBD and cannabinoids that can come just as well out of the hemp flower as that it can come out of the cannabis. So the idea was, well, hemp companies can get set up, and while they're getting their farms and their equipment and their machinery and everything ready to do fiber, they can grow for a few years, grow the hemp, basically grow it like cannabis, grow it in bushes that are separated out, and you grow it for the flower instead of having the plants all really close together where you grow it for the stem fiber. So but what that required is the ability to sell the final product, CBD, as a nutritional supplement, which you can do, when you go buy your tincture, and it's a CBD tincture. I love it. It helps me go to sleep. Sometimes if I have insomnia, that's what it's commonly used for, but it has other uses as well for skin oil and all kinds of things. But the problem is, in order to do that, the FDA needed to acknowledge that CBD was lawfully in commerce. and that's kind of the legal threshold for any kind of nutritional supplement that is newly developed and that is about to go on the market. The FDA will not approve it unless it's either so-called GRAS, generally recognized as safe, which refers to products that have been on the market for so long we all know they're all safe. We've all been using them forever, or that's been on the other hand, that's been developed by maybe a drug company and it's novel, and so the company would just have to go through the normal process of proving to the FDA that it's safe, and so you would have the trials, drug trials like any other drug.
Right.
But the problem with CBD is that it's already been legalized, and there's a clause in the law that the FDA continually cites saying that, well, if it's already been developed by a company, then we won't recognize it as GRAS, and we won't recognize it as a new legal product because it's already been developed and researched. It's kind of complicated. It's kind of it's counterintuitive, but for some reason, and after several years of intense lobbying of the FDA, they just refuse to budge. And so they can still consider CBD to be not lawfully in commerce. So that means that has all sorts of sort of ancillary impacts. For example, since CBD is not considered by the FDA to be lawfully in commerce, you can't trademark your brand. So if you develop a new tincture with your own sort of, terpene profile and your own little flavors, you have a cool new brand. It works great, tastes great, people love it. You can't get a trademark on it. So that's a big, impediment for a new business is trying to get going.
Right.
Anyway, so that's kind of where we're at right now.
I got a question about that. So if the FDA is seeing it through that lens, how does that impact any sort of legislation on testing? Because as it is now, like, here in California, when we legalized cannabis, that's when testing finally became mandatory, and it should, because cannabis is a bioaccumulator, and it will leach anything that is grown in and around when we're looking at like atmosphere and soil, but also, making sure that nobody's using any, growth inhibitors or anything like that with it. But also the fact that several years ago, they did random testing of CBD products, and some of them were found to have less CBD than they touted. Mm-hmm. Some didn't have any at all. And there was a case where it was high in THC. And I think it's one of the things that I talk to people who are living in states where they don't have access to dispensaries with tested products and they're curious about CBD. I always tell them, don't work with a company that won't give you a current COA on product.
Right.
So does the FDA's ruling on this, being that it's not legal, impact or not impact what we'll be seeing in testing?
That's a great question. My understanding is that for testing in general, well, first of all, every state has its own kind of protocols for testing, and every state operates their own health departments. In Virginia, CBD products are considered food products. All nutritional supplements are considered to be food products, and they're regulated like any food product. So there's inspections of facilities to make sure that there's no biohazards and all that sort of stuff. But for what you're talking about, all these kind of new challenges for the testing of cannabis products, traditionally the DEA has been the lead agency federally for that sort of thing, and has rules that states follow. Now, with the testing of cannabis, I think well,
and what I was thinking too is, because we're talking about hemp and it's an agricultural issue, like, where do we go when we talk about pesticides in our vegetables? Is it like, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's a Department of Ag that's talking about that, correct?
That's right. And so during there was a parallel process during this time of lobbying of the FDA over the last few years, where the USDA was also doing its regulatory activity, and it came up with a set of rules that would govern all that stuff, and it came up with a set of standards that products would have to adhere to, and that got worked out. I don't even remember the details because the FDA never came around, and so it's kind of moot because unless you're going to just kind of ignore the FDA, and that happens a lot. I mean, that's part of the chaotic situation here is that there is so much of it on the market, and it's everywhere, and people aren't like falling down.
Right.
So there are all of that is doable. There are standards that the FDA that the USDA has put in place in order to regulate hemp and hemp products from flower to bottle, if you will. Once it's in the bottle, then it's up to the health departments of every state to make sure that what's in the bottle is, it doesn't have toxins, and is labeled properly. In other words, that everything that the label says is in it, and nothing else. And so there's labeling again, it's basically the same way that food is regulated. Food labels have to have certain things, like when you buy a soda or when you buy a food product, and it'll have on the back of the label, it'll say nutritional facts, like that. Most states will require, and Virginia does, and I assume California probably does, that those nutritional facts, there are certain elements that have to be there, sugars, fats, carbohydrates, whatever else is in the product, milligrams. Now, one of the ways that they trick you, though, is that the regulators will, and this is the most recent sort of contrivance in Virginia that knocked a lot of hemp products out of the market, is that they required there to be on the label an indicator of the milligrams per serving. Now, that's probably a good idea in general to do, but the standards that they promulgated in Virginia were so strict that it was impossible to comply, because they said that you can first of all, because taking a step back again, 0.3% THC is the federal legal limit of how much THC is allowed to be in a CBD product. So you can have up to and including 0.3% THC. If it's 0.31, it's illegal. So
we call that hot hemp.
Right. Yeah, that's hot. Right. Yeah. Exactly. So that's doable. That's restrictive, and it's difficult to comply with and still make a profit if you're a CBD company, but it's doable. But Virginia took that one step further. And they said, well, okay, that we're going to require that, but we're also going to require that there be no more than, I forget the number of what it was, X number of milligrams per serving of THC in the product. And that made it so that effectively it meant that threshold was more restrictive than 0.3%. So that meant that in order to comply, it was not affordable for companies. But they would have to remove all of their products that were already on the market and reformulate them, and they would lose, all their money. And as you probably, and a lot of people business know, these business plans, go work in terms of many years of a time horizon. So when you go changing the rules in the middle of the game like that, it doesn't work.
No.
But it makes one think that perhaps that was intentional. And as a lawyer, I can tell you, yeah, I think probably so.
Yeah.
That's how they do it. That's how they restrict it. That's how they get around the political problem of saying, sorry, you can't do that. They make it a health. They pretend it's like, well, what about the children? And which is a legitimate thing. Obviously, nobody wants to, get their kids too stoned, and nobody wants bad products on the market.
Right, but if you don't have a thriving illicit, or as I like to refer to it as traditional market, you have just lessened youth access 100-fold.
Right. There's ways of doing it. Look at alcohol. I mean, there's ways of doing this. We can do this.
Yeah. I mean, in California here, I remember when I was still in dispensary, and one day I was helping at the front desk, and there was a lady who came in her 80s, didn't have her ID. I couldn't let her in. I felt so bad because she was like, damn it, you can tell I'm over 21. But I was like, these are the things that are coming into play so that when we are talking to government, local, and state, and, you know, a federal eventually, that, yeah, we're being really hard-nosed about this to make sure that absolutely no children get into dispensaries.
Right. Right, which is should be the industry standard, and it is. And but there are bad actors. You know, it's very interesting. I'm not typically a conspiracy theorist, and I don't readily put a tinfoil hat on. But it's just kind of interesting that every time there's a piece of legislation that's coming up for a vote in Virginia, all of a sudden we start reading these articles about, some kid went to the hospital. You know, and you don't like to hear those stories, and they happen. And they're because one of the things that happens is that these convenience stores kind of do what they do, and ignore the law. And that's another, because a lot of these convenience stores are they're not mom and pops. They're like multi-state operations,
right? Retail
operations. And you know, you walk in a gas station, and you know, it's like, well, why would you buy your medicine in a gas station, right? But they do it, and you go in there, and that's one thing is like they came up in Virginia, man. It was just like clockwork. It was just on the eve of the vote, and all of a sudden these articles, gas stations are selling marijuana. They're claiming it's hemp.
Oh, they should go spend some time in New York, and they'll really see how that works.
Right? Okay. How does that work in New York?
Every store, every block. I should not say every store, but every block in New York when I was there in April had a smoke shop that was selling weed. There are all these illegal stores, and they don't care how old you are.
Right.
Most of them don't, at least.
It just gives the whole industry a bad name.
It does.
You know? And the politicians then go and use that as an excuse.
Well, but I think the biggest issue with that is, and we're struggling with this in California, because when I was the co-chair of the legalization task force for San Francisco, and we were talking about the traditional market, and then also how that directly in many ways can connect to equity programs, because as we know, a lot of people in the traditional market are people of color. They're also who are targeted for mass incarceration.
Right.
And they're like, what are we going to do about this, about the competition? It's like, well, how about if we lower the threshold for entry into the legal market? But they did exactly the opposite. They made it really hard for people to get licenses, to be able to, you know, be approved for their businesses, whatever buildings they're in. It was really hard because of the different constraints that different municipalities put in. And then this whole thing about a green zone. Well, you know, you have a green zone in a city, that is something that's going to be attracting a lot of people who want to rip off these legitimate businesses, which is what we're seeing here in California. All these legitimate businesses are getting broken into and robbed, and they have no recourse because, you know, you can't call your insurance company and be like, someone stole all my weed.
When you say green zone, what does that mean?
So the industrial area that's approved for cannabis businesses.
Okay. Right.
And, you know, we talked about the fact that, you know, you shouldn't be putting the addresses of these businesses on the internet for people to see them. Yeah, you need to have a database.
Right.
But, you know, these are setups that, you know, they think are going to be containing the industry. But what it does is it actually targets the legitimate industry.
Right. Right.
And these are the people that are finding that they can't maintain businesses because how many times a year have they been hit?
Right.
Or the fact that it's so expensive to do business and the taxes are so high. And, you know, that we have farmers up in Humboldt that are committing suicide.
You know, which it all kind of comes back to Congress, the United States Congress, because that relates to these Treasury regulations where you're not allowed to have a bank. Banks are too afraid to do business. And so, you know, you can't take a credit card. You have to have a cash basis on your business. Yeah. I mean, that's just insane.
And then paying your taxes all in cash.
Well, but we could change that. And so, you know, our friends in Congress, like, you know, Earl Blumenauer and all those kind of folks have been trying to get this done for a long time.
Yeah.
Congress, by the way, is also needs to act to force the FDA's hand with respect to CBD, because the FDA is just a lost cause. And so there's been a lot of activity to try to get Congress to to force the FDA or for Congress to just declare that CBD is generally recognized as safe, is lawfully in commerce.
Well, and then we're looking at that because I had both Barbara Lee and Earl Blumenauer on the show earlier this year separately. And I was talking to them about, the high taxation that we're seeing at the state level. Mm-hmm. And when we get to federal legalization, we know that the feds always want their taste of the pie too. So how is that going to help us survive? Or what do you think as far as people who like yourself who are working in the legal portion of it and, working with lobbyists and different people like that, how do you think that we're going to be able to get both the state and federal level to work together? Because we know they need to get their money, but in a way that actually helps the industry survive.
Right. It's a critical question. And there's got to be a balance in there somewhere because there's taxation, but there's also subsidies. And especially with regard to hemp, when again, we're talking about agriculture, it's really hard to imagine that there's any such thing as profitable agriculture.
Yeah.
To my mind, period. Anywhere.
And that's sad.
Agriculture, farming is just not profitable. That's why it's subsidized everywhere. Everywhere. Every country and international law, it's all subsidized. And, and on the other side, there's the taxation part, which, when we're talking about achieving legalization, convincing folks that legalization is a good idea, typically the argument is it's instead of making it a criminal issue, we should make it to extent it's a health issue, but legalize it and regulate it. And I agree with that broadly.
Absolutely.
But it's just that it's where the rubber meets the road, it gets tricky and complicated because if you tax it too much, then you don't get rid of the black market. Because because people can, why would I go to a rec store or even to a dispensary and pay top dollar for great bud when I can, get it from the dealer down the street. So that's kind of the obvious problem with taxation. But you do want to tax it some, and you hear stories from Colorado where they've got nice revenues from their cannabis taxation that's going into their schools and it's going into good stuff and it's helping good government. So There's a balance to be struck there somewhere. But in the meantime, I think in order to avoid excessive taxation from the start, and also in order to promote equity, which is really a critical part of all of this, there has to be, you have to have the support of government, basic support of government. There has to be some degree of subsidies. You have to have minimal fees, and you have to make sure that the cost of entry is as low as you can possibly make it. In Virginia, you have when you first started getting hemp licenses, it was cost for all the fees, the entry fees, and then you had the requirements for establishing a facility that was secure and healthy and safe and all that. You ended up having to have at least $200,000 or $300,000 just to start up. There's no way a family, a small, medium operation. We want cannabis to work at the local level. We want it to work for families. We want it to work for local communities and local economies. We want to be able to have cannabis farms where you can go and it's like a winery, and you can have cannabis tourism.
Yes.
And that's the direction that I see it. But in order to facilitate that, we've got to get rid of these crazy rules that are so restrictive and make it so expensive.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people have turned to hemp, at least, what I was seeing here in California. They're like, wow, this new industry, this is a way of creating generational wealth for my family. And then some of them have had the bad experience of hiring a consultant that makes recommendations. And then they just bought the wrong cultivar of hemp and they have a whole field of stuff that they don't know what to do with.
Right. It's so important to avoid those mistakes early on. Yeah. Which is easy to make mistakes when you're farming. That's what you do. You work those mistakes into your model. Mm-hmm. You can't really do that if you're starting up a business that's going to end up being either a wholesale or retail thing with cannabis. But
hey, so what's the deal with, I know in cannabis 280E is a big issue, but is that the same thing in hemp? Are they having the same issues with taxation in that way?
Well, no, because
Because of the Farm Bill, correct?
I think that's right. Yeah, because in hemp, you don't it's legal to farm it as long as it's 0.3% THC or less.
Yeah.
It's legal.
Well, and it'd be interesting to see, like, if we started looking at things like subsidies and different things to enrich the program, like how they'd be able to support farmers if they purchased whatever, whether it were clones or seeds to grow that were supposed to grow in a certain way. And of course, you can't control nature.
Right.
But you get a hot crop.
Uh-huh. Well, there's ways around that too. I mean, the Virginia legislation had provisions where it was a quote unquote negligence provision where where you get a chance if you get a hot crop, you get a chance to, like, destroy it without any adverse consequences.
But I wonder, like, if it'd be possible to have in the future some sort of insurance that would be able to help.
Insurance is another part of it. Absolutely. Sure.
What are you excited about? I mean, there are so many things that we have to work on. It's going to keep both of us busy for a very long time.
You know what I'm excited about is the fact that this plant takes care of itself.
Yeah.
Somehow. It just keeps going. And you can't stamp it out. You can't.
No, it's truly a weed.
It's like, well, I was just going to say, because back in the 60s and 70s, well, really ever since the 30s, but the DEA and the federal government tried to literally eradicate cannabis, to remove it from reality, and to get rid of all the so-called what do you call it? Well, it's feral hemp is what is the proper term for it. It's growing on the side of the road.
That'd be a good name for something.
Feral hemp.
Feral hemp.
The Feral Hemp Coalition.
That's right. I love that.
A friend of mine that I play music with sometimes was saying he thought that the Hemp Coalition would be a great name for a band. So it's just fun. I'm excited about fun. It produces fun. It promotes fun. It's fun to grow.
Yeah.
I grow. In Virginia, we can grow 4 plants now. So that's my hobby. I love it.
Yeah. What's going on with personal use and everything in Virginia?
Well, so what happened was the Democrats took control of the Virginia legislature and the governorship for the first time in many years. I guess it was in 2016 or by 2018. And so the Democrats got some decent legislation for legalizing cannabis passed. And it set forth a timeline of a number of years, like most states who are regulating do, to put it in place so that a number of years down the line they would have a recreational market. But in the meantime, they would set up a state agency to regulate it, like you are part of in California. So they had this sort of plan that they put into place. One of the immediate things with that plan was to immediately legalize it for small amounts of personal growth. So we tried to make it 12 plants, which I think is what Michigan has. I think that's the number of any state. My
home state, where you used to be able to get arrested for resin in a bowl, and now the highest amount of plants.
Okay, well, there you go. And so Virginia ended up passing for 4 plants. So now in Virginia, but before I explain that, so in the meantime, so that legislation passed. It set forth a timeline for an eventual recreational market, setting up an agency which would then promulgate rules, etc. But in the short term, legalizing it 4 plants for personal growth. But then in 2020, the Republicans took the House of Delegates and the governorship. So that legislation and that plan moving forward just got frozen in place. Mm. And there were some really good equity provisions of that too. They were going to give preference of licenses to previous persons convicted of cannabis crimes. We're going to get a leg up on licensing, things like that. All of that is just stalled right now. But in the meantime, the personal growth provisions went into place, and the personal possession. In Virginia, you can possess up to an ounce. You can take it with you in your car as long as it's not like accessible it's kind of like an open container.
Yeah, stick it in your trunk.
Yeah, exactly. So you can carry an ounce. It has a gift provision. So if somebody comes over to your house and you've grown weed and you've got a pound of weed sitting in your closet, you can give that person an ounce. Legally, that person can take an ounce. Any guest, you can give them an ounce. So that it's like it creates that little kind of gift economy, which is pretty cool. It's pretty restrictive too. You're not allowed to carry on a public bus or train. You're not allowed to smoke in public, consume it, anything like that. And as I say, there's no recreational market yet. But there like everywhere else, there are some storefronts here and there where you can go and buy edibles and get your gummies, get dispensaries, and whatnot. So there's still quite a lot of bit of chaos and uncertainty and about it. But at least we can grow 4 plants, so you can grow your own medicine, or you can do like I do and have a hobby, and it's just fun. It's a lot of work. It's growing weed is not. It's like anything. There's a lot that can go wrong.
Yeah.
You have to know how to water. You have to know nutrition, and you have to know bugs. And if you're going to grow it outdoors, you have to. There's lots of pest problems with it that can come up, and in a humid climate back east, it's a challenge too. California's a better climate. It's more of an arid climate.
I wonder, with your climate, like how a landrace would do in your backyard, just because they tend to like the hotter, more steamy climates.
Well, I've been growing a variety that I got from a person who produced the seeds in Virginia, and that's done pretty well. So by now there has been developed a stock of a genetic stock that's localized.
Yeah. Do you think, and one of the things that I've been talking to people about lately is, eventually we'll be seeing interstate commerce. And even though I don't like to compare alcohol to cannabis, I think about the grape growing regions throughout the United States.
Right.
What do you mean, and I'm just asking you to whip out your crystal ball, but what do you think you'll see for like prominent areas that will really shine when we get into that?
Interesting. Well, it's a great question. I mean, I think that I guess there's a lot of places where that's kind of already happening in Colorado and California, Oregon, Washington, and those places. It's going to be tricky to work out all the details and all the neighborly things. For example, with hemp and cannabis, if you're going to grow a field of hemp, that's going to be your conventional fiber grain crop, then you can't grow cannabis anywhere near that because the pollen travels so far. And if you have hemp and cannabis crops near each other, it's like each will ruin the other. But especially the hemp will ruin the cannabis. And Oregon went through a lot of problems with this a number of years ago. I don't know if they solved it.
I remember that.
You're going to have some regulations where the state has some boundaries and rules and sets aside some land for this and some land for that. So that's going to have to get worked out. But in the meantime, I mean, I'd love to see Northern California continue to be one of the world's leading places for cannabis. I will say though, as an environmental attorney who used to do work in Northern California, that's a big issue too, because we can't log forests in order to create cannabis.
Right.
And we can't allow. It's a problem with watersheds, water pollution from rat poison that people use. That's all. Those issues have been kind of at the forefront, I guess, up there for a long time. I've been a little bit out of touch of that, having moved back east. But so those things are going to have to get worked out. But I don't know. I do see every state's going to have to figure out their own way with that,
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting to see. And I'm just really glad that there are people like you involved in it.
Well, thanks. And I'm glad there are people like you too.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
If people want to follow your work or check you out on social media or anything, can they do that?
I don't really have a Facebook thing right now. I've kind of gotten away from Facebook.
I don't blame you.
But I guess I would just say I'll throw out my email address out there.
Okay.
People can just email me at Sam Johnston at earthlink.net. Sam Johnston is one word, and that's Johnston with a T. Sam Johnston at earthlink.net.
And before you go, we'll get into a little bit of music stuff. Are you playing out a lot?
Oh, sure.
Where can people see you play?
Never stop doing that. Well, I've got a band in Virginia called Mama Tried, which is about a good bit of Grateful Dead covers, but we've got some good rock and original songs too. And I play keyboards in the band. I play with great players in the band. I'm lucky to be with a guitar player by the name of Charlie Pasterfield, who used to be in a well-known East Coast band called Skip Castro. Susan Munson fronts the band, great lead vocalist, another kind of a fixture of the Charlottesville, Virginia music scene. Charlottesville's a great music. That's where I live, Charlottesville.
That's what I've heard, that it's a great music
And
scene.
it's great. There's so many bands, so many musicians there. And we play places like, the Jefferson Theater and the Ting Pavilion, which was expanded a number of years ago by Dave Matthews, who was from that area.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Who also likes weed.
Yes, he does. That's what I hear. Yeah, well, and he's been active for Family Farms for a long time too, doing the Farm Aid shows.
That's cool.
Right.
Well, and in addition to doing keyboards, I heard that you're a pretty mean harmonica player.
Ah, well,
I heard you wail.
Thanks. Sure, whenever I can.
Well, Sam, thanks so much for being on the show, and I thank you for the great conversation. I mean, I like to look at everything that's going on throughout the nation, but it's really easy to get stuck in the place that you're living in, get consumed by what's going on there.
Right. It's hard. And it's always with cannabis. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back. But we just persist. We'll keep going. Like I say, this plant will take care of itself. But we need to be there to help it along. And it's a relationship between humanity and this plant is real. And it's thousands of years old.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm happy to be doing the legal cha-cha with you.
Couldn't be more delighted myself, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take it
Alrighty.
easy. And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sarah Pion on Facebook and Planted with Sarah on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsarah.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher, TuneIn. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.